Welcome to the Sad Dad Games podcast. I'm Shan.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Lundy.
I was making you guys wait for it that time.
Well, you didn't say wait
pause.
for it, Barney Stinson style, so nobody understood what you were doing. We're going to be talking about Spider-Man, the DLC, The City That Never Sleeps. Maybe the best DLC I've ever played. I'm struggling to recall something that is this expansive and thorough and just well done. It is a full-fledged saga, 3 episodes, and it has character depth, and, well, Spider-Man barely changes in it, if at all, but there are other characters that are very fascinating, very well thought out, and it has sort of a Dark Knight trilogy flavor to it, where, you know, like the second episode gets the darkest, and like it evolves in tone across the 3 episodes. They're short, they're sweet, and very well delivered.
Yeah, I think that I would say that this is some of the best DLC I think I've played. The story that runs through it isn't quite as compelling as the main campaign, but it's very, very good, very well told, lots of fun characters, especially for Spider-Man fans. It's fun to see, you know, characters like Black Cat and Hammerhead and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm a big fan of this DLC pack. Full disclosure, for this recording, I didn't play through them again because I had just a busy week. But I've played through it like 3 or 4 times in the past. Maybe not 3 or 4, like 2 or 3. But I have done it previously. I just didn't for this playthrough because, you know, job and adult and grown up and stuff. So, but I'm excited to talk about it. Some good stuff.
Yeah. Is Hammerhead, how prevalent is he in the comics? Because I had never heard of him before playing this.
I'd say he's like a B-tier villain. He's one of Spider-Man's bigger villains, but he's not like Green Goblin or Venom or Doc Ock. He's like a B-tier Spider-Man villain.
This is what I love about good or excellent writers that get their hands on Spider-Man, is that they can take any villain and elevate them to be equal to a Green Goblin. And so I was very compelled by Hammerhead's character and his ideological motivations, and just like his proclivity for just like wanting to reinstill the fear of the mob in Manhattan. And I thought it was well acted, well delivered, and the dialogue was excellent. I just loved all of it.
Yeah. Like a lot of older Spider-Man villains, he's rooted in a lot of kind of goofiness. You know, like in the old comics, he's got a flat, a very flat top of his head. Yeah, it's just like completely flat. It's like his head is like a complete triangle. He's got like a flat steel plate in the top of his head, and he's like wearing a pinstripe suit, and he has a Tommy gun. And it's like that's kind of the level of Hammerhead you're dealing with in the original comics. So they've kind of evolved him in this game to be something a little more menacing and a little more serious, but still has some elements of silliness where he's like bashing in things with the metal in his head and stuff like that. So
until he becomes a cyborg, that's when it's like, okay,
and
whatever.
Then it's just full silly. Yeah.
It looks like we're leaving.
He went full cyborg.
Yeah, it's not grounded anymore. It's just campy, but it's still super fun.
I mean, but it's still a video game. You know, you got to have that big boss battle kind of thing. So,
yeah. And you have to heighten the stakes. You have to, make him more menacing. And how do you do that? You give him a robot body.
I mean, if we're being honest, that's really the only way that Hammerhead would be able to go toe-to-toe with Spider-Man physically, is if he is enhanced somehow, because he's just kind of a normal dude with a hard head.
Well, him and Silver Sable at the same time, both badasses. You have to have a cyborg body.
Yeah.
Especially with it, and a hammerhead, though. Like, that's a good combination.
Cyborg body and a hammerhead. The classic 2.
All right, so the first segment is the heist. And this one is focused on Felicia as the deuteragonist. So, Felicia Hardy, Black Cat, she was, partially a part of the main campaign, and we just see her little token cats dropped around the city, and it's just sort of alluding to this DLC, so it's great foreshadowing.
Yeah, you never see her in the main campaign, right? I think it's just like some voice recordings and some little conversations, and there's like some side missions, but yeah, you never see her.
Yeah, so she is a former love interest of Spider-Man, and how I've heard this put, and I thought it was excellent, was that Felicia Harding loves Spider-Man and not Peter Parker. Gwen Stacy loves Peter Parker and not Spider-Man. And MJ, as far as I understand, is the only character that embraced both halves of his character.
Oh, yeah. It's actually, yeah, that's pretty well put. There's in the comics, I don't remember if it's the original one when Black Cat first appeared, but it's one of the times where Black Cat and Spider-Man start kind of becoming an item, is they actually, she doesn't know his secret identity. It's like Spider-Man and Black Cat form a relationship, and then Peter feels close to her and is like, oh, I want to tell you my secret identity, and he takes his mask off, and Felicia kind of freaks out. She's like, no, put your mask back on. She like doesn't really want anything to do with Peter. She's very attracted to Spider-Man, but not so much Peter.
And attracted to the mystery and the intrigue. Yeah. And he's not as sexy as like as a nerd, right? Like he yeah. Anyway, she's into that.
No, tell us more how you think what makes Spider-Man sexy.
Well, I was speaking as a stand-in. Well, also I think I think that Spider-Man with that skin-tight groin suit, very sexy.
Obviously. I mean, you do you, man. No judgment.
Okay, have you seen how his skin-tight suit exemplifies like his delts and his arms? Like, it's very
intentional design.
Suit.
Yeah.
his glutes, good for him. I've never had glutes like that. Mine are just like typical sedentary man butt.
He's real close with his tailor. Yeah.
Himself.
Yeah, himself.
Could you imagine measuring yourself for this spandex suit and just like having to get the inseam and
gotta get it just right to accentuate all your muscles. You get one rip and it's like, oh man.
Good thing he's hours so and hours. Flexible. Yeah. All right, so this DLC, it starts with Felicia's return and a museum heist. So she resurfaces and she interrupts Spider-Man at a museum robbery, stealing a hidden USB drive that the Maja crime family was after. She claims Hammerhead forced her to steal multiple drives by kidnapping her son, and even suggesting that Peter might be the father, which convinces Spider-Man to help.
Dun, dun, dun. I mean, he would have helped anyways, but like, he's Spider-Man.
Manipulate his sense of duty and and responsibility, which is like his core personality trait.
Yeah.
She knows how to manipulate his values, which I appreciate as a foil to his character. All right, there's a vault break-in and betrayal. Spider-Man and Felicia team up to infiltrate Hammerhead's vault. At a crucial moment, Felicia betrays Spider-Man, revealing that she never had a son. It was a ruse to manipulate Peter's help. She had been after the Maja's fortune on those drives all along, giving Hammerhead fake drives. And then there's a cliffhanger where, as Felicia escapes with real drives, Hammerhead retaliates and Spider-Man tries to warn Felicia, but her house explodes in a fiery ambush, and Felicia is presumed dead, although no body is found. So it's like, if no body, no death. That's a cardinal rule of media.
I was going to say, in comic book world, it's like sometimes even if you do find the body, like they might still be alive.
And they come up with the weirdest explanations, too, as to why it's like, well, but they actually didn't die. And it's, comic book death is cheap. Like, I mean, it's basically, like they might as well be taking a nap. Like, they're going to be back.
Is there anybody, okay, so I'm not as comic heavy and well-versed as the two of you. Who has died as a superhero and stayed dead?
Cap stayed
they
dead
could
for a
die
while.
and then they reboot the canon.
I would say Captain America died at the end of Civil War, and he stayed dead for longer than most. He obviously came back, but it's like 5 years, maybe.
It was a
maybe
handful,
not quite,
yeah.
but
like,
longer than most. But I can't think of a hero that died and hasn't come back.
Did Spider-Man die and then they had to reboot it?
Ultimate
No,
Spider-Man died, and
Miles. Yeah,
Miles Ultimate Spider-Man died. Miles took over, and eventually Marvel decided to try to just like they were tired of having multiple universes, and so they did another Secret Wars event that mashed everything into one. And so at that point, you had
the Days
Peter
of Future
Parker.
Past.
It was the second telling of the Secret Wars story arc, and that allowed them to just reset their canon essentially and just say, okay, and now, like, here's the stuff that worked in and so, like, in one universe they had Peter Parker and Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen, and now they've restarted the Ultimate Universe again because they want multiple continuities again. But the Ultimate Spider-Man, that original one, he did die and stayed dead. Actually, I think they might have actually resurrected him now that I think about it. I don't know.
I don't know for sure, but Ultimate Spider-Man might be my favorite run of Spider-Man comics. They're
That's
very
what you
good.
had always told me.
Yeah, the first it's the first 111 issues were illustrated by Mark Bagley, and he's my favorite comic book artist, one of my favorite artists of all time. I taught myself how to draw reading Mark Bagley illustrated comics. He did a run of Spider-Man comics in the 90s as well. He did like the whole Clone Saga, and like he's an incredibly talented artist and is a huge reason of why I like the Ultimate series so much. Particularly the Venom storyline in the Ultimate series is really good.
Yeah. And I do highly recommend that everybody read that Death of Spider-Man story arc, in that Ultimate Universe. Because to me, and I don't know, I haven't talked to a lot of other people about it, but I think that it's one of my favorite Spider-Man comics. Like, just that death arc, because it really nails, who Peter Parker is and, like, his motivations and like, it really gives him the opportunity to shine and really, focuses on all of these key characteristics that we've talked about over all of these episodes. I thought it was a wonderful way to tell that story, and to end that character's, run. And so I really like that one. There's a lot of other stories for Spider-Man that you can do a lot worse than the death of Spider-Man. There are a couple of really rough runs, but in my opinion, Death of Spider-Man is not one of those rough. It is
top notch. Good stuff.
Yes, it's very
Actually, I don't know. I haven't actually read The Death of Spider-Man. It's one of the gaps in knowledge that I have for my Spider-Man knowledge. It's just kind of it passed me by when it happened, and I just haven't had a chance to come back to it yet. But it's been perpetually on my list of comics to catch up on.
Which superhero, in your opinion, has had the best death?
Cap's death was really good. When it meant something, Cap's death was, because it came off the heels of Civil War, and the Civil War comic series, like the first one, was spectacular. Like maybe the best comic series I've ever read. It's just so good. And then the death of Captain America came on the heels of that as kind of a result of what had happened in Civil War, and it was like, I remember reading it like as it came out, and then like a few months later, I saw someone with a license plate that said R.I.P. Cap, and I was like, because it was a big deal at the time. Like Captain America died in the comics, and it like really seemed like he was dead because they didn't do anything with his character for a long. And then when, of course, they ran out of ideas, they brought him back. But that was an impactful one for me, where it was like it felt weighty and important, and like a significant cultural event, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, my no-duh answer for just being a part of the MCU is Iron Man, because basically nobody has died yet. But I mean, just Robert Downey Jr. being one of the most seminal actors of our lifetime, especially because they're taking advantage of our understanding of his off-screen life and how he was able to overcome his, tragic history and become one of the greatest superheroes and important role models in our lifetimes. And now he's, won an Oscar and everything. It's just taking even our meta understanding of like who he is off screen and then portraying his on-screen moment in Endgame. Just like that moment will just, it's rapturous. It's one of the most incredible moments I've ever experienced in theaters.
Agreed. Endgame was awesome. It was something else. Yeah.
Very, very well. I really hope that I can, experience something in the theater that is even close to that level. Like Infinity War and Endgame were just a completely different. Like there was nothing like them before or since. Just anywhere in cinema. Like it wasn't just Marvel or the superhero genre. It was it was a complete experience to just go and be there and to feel that with everybody else, crowds cheering and going crazy. Yep. It was nuts.
Well, and it was right before COVID, and so it was like maybe the last cultural zeitgeist moment that I can remember having in theaters, where I felt like a part of the cultural, tapestry, that everybody was united and part of something, and there was no division that I feel like is a part of everything that exists right now, ever since COVID.
Well, and it was a culmination of 10 years of storytelling and world building and investing in characters, and then it just kind of it brought it all to a head, and it made it all matter, and very significant. It was I still think that probably the first time, when I saw the first Avengers movie, will always be more significant, because I was just so completely flabbergasted that movie was even happening. But Endgame and what's the one before Endgame?
Infinity War.
Infinity War and Endgame were just amazing experiences to see in theaters. It felt like an appropriate cap to something that I had really cared about for a decade.
Yeah, that's a really good point about that first Avengers, because we saw it together that opening night.
Yeah.
And
dressed up and everything.
Dressed up, yeah, midnight.
Dress up as, go ahead and say.
I was Captain America.
Anytime we go anywhere, Lundy is always Captain America. And I was the only one in our friend group that could grow a beard, and so I was Tony Stark.
Okay. I was going to ask if you were Squirrel Girl or something.
He was...
For the Avengers? No, we got one of the Avengers.
Yeah. And,
okay.
I mean, Eric built a really cool little arc reactor thing that he wore under his shirt that shone through.
I remember that.
Yeah, so that it would glow.
Yeah, but no, that one was that I think set the tone, because I had the same experience where it was I can't believe that this is happening, nothing like it had ever happened before, and so it wasn't quite as much cheering and going crazy, because audiences didn't quite know what to expect, and so everybody was kind of sitting there in that first Avengers movie getting their minds blown, this is awesome, this is working,
what is happening?
Yeah. And so
what is happening?
Once that tone got set and they continued to build on it, Infinity War and Endgame, everybody was we are all in, and it was, I mean, to an extent, I understand Martin Scorsese's criticism where he was it's more like an amusement park, and it's well, yeah, but that's
but amusement
phenomenal.
Parks are fun. It's a really good amusement park.
And for
if
the fact
everything was a Martin Scorsese film, then we'd be bored to tears. You have to have a balance of all types of movies.
Well, and if you think about he said that as a negative thing, but it's for films to change the genre that drastically. There has to be something to it where it has that wide of an appeal and it evokes that kind of reaction and emotion. No other film had ever, no other movies or anything had ever tried to get that same kind of emotion out of where people are cheering and going crazy in the theater, something happens on screen and the whole crowd erupts. Nothing had ever tried that before.
The last time I felt that on that scale was probably The Return of the King, and so it'd been decades.
Yeah.
And it used to be for Harry Potter movies, Pirates of the Caribbean, where you would go and you would just allow everybody to be cheering and yelling during the movie because you were all a part of it, and it was
you'd
just
have to go see it again
this
the next day to
understanding
actually watch
it.
Yeah. I did that with the Avengers movie. I saw the Avengers movie I think 4 or 5 times in theaters, and I went and watched it the first time and I loved it and it blew my mind. We were all screaming and cheering, but then I had to go back and watch it I think the next day because I was I don't really know, I feel I missed some stuff because there's a lot of yelling and clapping and
yeah. Nothing beats The Return of the King opening night at midnight. Just midnight showings in general, there was a level of energy that you'll never experience in theater these days, even on opening day.
Yeah, only because when you're going at midnight, that you're surrounded with you're surrounded with people that are just as excited and dedicated as you are, and you just don't get that same thing where it's this movie releases on Friday and we're going to start showings at 3 p.m. on Thursday. It's that's not the same thing.
Yeah,
And I
or
mean,
midnight-
I'm old and I get tired. I don't know that I'd go to midnight showings for pretty much anything anymore. But when I was younger and when they happened, it was like nothing was quite as fun as a new Marvel movie midnight showing.
Or even like midnight release of Harry Potter books. And,
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Barnes and Noble lines would wrap around the store multiple times. It's like, it was chaos back then, but like you were all a part of something.
Yeah, I worked at a Jamba Juice right down the street from a Barnes & Noble in Jordan Landing in Utah.
Yeah, that's the one I was at.
Yeah.
I was at that book release while you were at that Jamba.
Yep. And I worked a lot of the nights when they would do midnight book releases. I worked when they did all the Twilight books and a lot of the Harry Potter books. I was there working, and people would come in and buy smoothies, and it was always fun to see the crowds. The Twilight crowds were special. They were interesting. It was a lot of
They're
like
still interesting.
it
They're
was a
trying
lot
to
of,
they're
like,
trying to have a
tween-
resurgence right now, and I don't want to allow it.
it was a lot of like tween girls and then like 30 and 40-year-old women and nothing else, no other demographics. And they were all like coming in and getting smoothies. And we even, Jamba did a cross promotion with Twilight for the 4th movie. And so we had like Twilight themed flavors. And so people came in to like get the Twilight themed flavors, and then they went to the theater to see the movie. And that was an interesting interesting night at work, because we had to stay open until like midnight 30 because we were right next to the movie theater. And so anyways, that's neither here nor there, but it was midnight releases. They bring in the fans. They really ardent, passionate people.
Yeah, millennials have the best IP and franchises in history to our names, and so we just like, and we can, and we have this passion around all of these things. And Gen Z has Twilight, and that's why they've focused all of their energy on like that one thing. But like, it sucks
Is
ass.
Twilight a Gen Z thing?
It's a Gen Z and youngest millennial thing.
I was gonna say, because I don't know, I dated a girl for a little while who was really into Twilight and wanted me to read all the books, and I did,
oldest
and they're
Gen
terrible.
Z and youngest millennial. It's like, if it's just
They're
you
very
can
bad
enjoy
books.
it. I did read it, and it's like when I was a part of like everyone kind of enjoying it, it's like you can kind of enjoy it, but like ultimately when you look back at it in retrospect, it doesn't age well, because it's ultimately about somebody who is stalking a girl, but she only allows it because he's handsome.
Yeah, it's super creepy. If you turn Edward into anyone besides a handsome teenage boy,
Yep.
the scenario becomes incredibly creepy. Anyways, there's lots of problems.
I just
with
want
Twilight. It's very weird.
I did want to point out, I had like a Barney Stinson like a theory around this Robert Pattinson phenomenon, or the Edward phenomenon, and I'd call it like the Edward Cullen's phenomenon, where essentially the difference between something being creepy or romantic is just how attractive a woman finds the man to be. And I was going through this in my head because I was in college, and I was trying to find women to date, and sometimes they'd find it creepy, and I'd do the same thing to someone else and it'd be romantic, and it's like, okay, well then they just didn't find me attractive, but this other person did.
Oh, you followed me home to make sure I got home safe. That's so cute. Oh, you followed me home? Ooh. Now you know where I live. Like,
Yeah, that's exactly it.
yep.
All right, we need to get back to the story because we have to time box this first section. All right,
Yeah,
so
Shan was all talking about time boxing before we started recording, and we just threw that crap right out the window. Yeah.
all right, so Black Cat as a foil to Spider-Man. So she, how I've heard this put is, Spider-Man writers understand that the best and most interesting characters or villains in a Spider-Man story are ones that borrow traits of Spider-Man but in a darker way, or take something and then foil it in with a twist. And so Black Cat, she has abilities like Spider-Man, but she takes it in a completely opposite direction. Whereas Spider-Man is responsible and altruistic, she's unpredictable and self-serving. She's free-spirited and morally gray, whereas he is morally absolute. And so we see this play out throughout the whole thing, where she is willing to bend rules and emotionally manipulate him to get what she wants. and he's constantly and relentlessly trying to be optimistic that he can pull her back to his side, and that he can convince her to use her powers for good.
Yeah, and I think that another interesting, I agree with all of that, but another interesting facet about Black Cat is that I think that she also tries to kind of pick her targets. She's like stealing money from the mob. She's not like mugging people on the street. She goes for high value targets, and she goes for usually for people who she thinks are not good people. She's not someone that's leaving
argument.
Yeah, she's not leaving a bunch of innocent people harmed in her wake, not intentionally anyways.
Except Spider-Man.
Except for Spider-Man, so I think that she's kind of like the honor among thieves kind of a thing. She's a thief with a general code of ethics, but is willing to bend and sway those things to suit her own needs. Like at the end of the day, Felicia's looking out for Felicia, and she's more concerned with like having fun and accumulating wealth. And she's like, oh, I love breaking into this art museum because I love the thrill. And so it's all about the thrill and the experience of what she's doing, of stealing high value things. But she's also not going to go like targeting innocent people, and she does have some instances where she helps Spider-Man out to help other people who might need help. And so she's kind of there's some altruism a little bit. She's, I don't know if I feel like I'm kind of talking in circles, but
I feel like they're just like almost mirror opposites as far as like she is almost completely selfish, and he is and he has never displayed any ounce of selfishness. He's altruistic to a fault.
I figured out how to phrase what I want to phrase. When Felicia is with Peter, when she's with Spider-Man, Spider-Man is able to get some of her good characteristics out a little bit more, so she's more willing to help other people sometimes. But then at the end of the day, it boils down to she's like, no, I want to do this for me and for whatever. And so I think that's what gives Peter that little bits of hope, that it's like, oh, well, maybe I can, lean over to the good side, because when she's around Peter, when she's with Peter, she shows little signs of that and little things here and there where she'll do good, or she'll try to go straight or whatever, And but then ultimately, when push comes to shove, when the going gets hard, she falls back on, nope, just going to take care of me.
Yeah. And so we actually see this motif in each of the stories, that Peter keeps trying to put his trust in these female Deuterogonists, and we see it sometimes. Well, in Felicia, in this first one, it doesn't pay off. It actually portrays him as naive to a fault, that he keeps doing this. He's so optimistic and so trusting that he keeps being misguided. And I love that she understands his character so implicitly that she can take advantage of it. And I thought that was an excellent twist of her as a female character to be emotionally manipulative that way, in a way that I wouldn't expect a traditional female character to be written. And I'll try to get back to like how I love how all of these female characters were written in interesting and subversive ways. And but yeah, so here we see him try to put his trust in somebody and it fails. Then in the other two, he puts his trust in Yuri, and that fails. He puts his faith in Silver, and that succeeds. And then Felicia actually comes back, and his trust is rewarded, and so he actually ends up with 2 out of 3. And so, arguably, it's like he's almost immutable in character throughout these 3 entries, but it's challenging him in different ways throughout these characters, and I'll get to the other ones later, to see, does his moral absolutism stand up in these different aspects, and and it's actually asking the question, is trusting too much a bad thing, or is it being rewarded sometimes enough to keep doing it? And does it show, is that an important part of Peter, even if it doesn't always work out? because he inspires people with his optimism and his, his trust. He's constantly lifting people up with his character.
Yeah, I do kind of like the way, because each of these 3 chapters kind of focus on different people. The first chapter focuses a little more on Black Cat, the second one is a little more on Yuri, and then the third one's more on Sable. And you see how Spider-Man interacts with those people and how he how he puts his trust in those people and how they reciprocate that trust either positively or negatively.
And I think it's interesting to consider as well the way, like, the foundation of trust for each of them. Like, it's something different. He trusts Black Cat partially because he's not really thinking with his head. Like the way
he's
that
very seductive. Yeah. They wrote her very well.
They wrote her extremely, because Black Cat has always been just overtly sexual. Like, she's a very sexual character in the comics. Like, the way that she's designed, she's extremely busty and revealing. Yeah. And
need I say more?
I really like actually how Insomniac did it, where like they gave her a very tactical suit that's not very revealing, but in the way that she moves and the way that she talks, it's still just like extremely like just overtly seductive. And you can see that Peter, who's usually pretty focused, is like the second she shows up, he's a little bit like
wearing a spandex suit.
He's really struggling to like stay focused. And
yeah, he kind of like lets her bend stretch the boundaries of their relationship. Even though he's with MJ, he allows her to break that contact.
Yes. Yeah.
And
which
I was like, this is interesting. Is there a reason to this?
I mean,
is he being seduced?
I in Peter's defense, I would allow her to manipulate me.
She is very attractive, and she's very seductive.
Yeah, and so like that trust is, like he trusts her partially because he's just like, well, like, like there's just that enticing, like, well, if this works out well, and he kind of forgets a lot of his other obligations. He ultimately kind of comes back to the right thing every time, the same way that Black Cat is, she feels similar things, but ultimately comes back to just serving herself. And so the trust there is not your typical, trust foundation. With Yuri, we've seen throughout the original campaign, like, they have a long history of working together and being very good and successful at it. So that trust is well established. And a lot of Peter's motivations are not wanting to let Yuri down and trying to, when he feels like he did fail her, trying to make up for that. And, so like, they have a really interesting dynamic in that sense, where that trust has already been established, and then they kind of fail each other. And then Silver Sable, there really isn't that trust there initially, and Peter's trying to build that foundation, because throughout the majority of the regular campaign, they're at odds with each other. They are enemies. And she shows up, and it's like, hey, look, we need to work together, kind of out of necessity, and trying to build that foundation of trust. It's a reluctant trust, I think, on both parts. And so I think it's a really interesting dynamic that not only is it a tale, like you said, Shan, of, Spider-Man putting his trust in these people and whether or not it pays off, but how that trust was formed.
We are rewarded in this section of the DLC with Peter finding out that MJ is open to the idea of having a child with him. So, ultimate role and responsibility for a Peter Parker type is to become a father, and she wants that with him, but they just kind of intimate it instead of being explicit.
Well, at the end of the chapter, once they find out that, Black Cat isn't actually pregnant, and then she appears to be dead, then they have a little conversation, I think at the diner, right? And she says, they say something like, MJ asks him, how do you feel about not being a dad? And he's like, kind of relieved. I just have a lot of other things to do. And then MJ says something like, I think you'll be a great dad one day at the right time. And then Peter says, with the right person. And you're like, oh, you two, you guys. So happy for the two of you, just so darn cute. But yeah, it's, they're starting to make, talk about potential future plans, which I think is great. Little hint at Mayday Parker.
Mayday, is that?
Yeah, that's her in the comics. Peter and MJ have a daughter named Mayday.
Mayday is not a good name, but they
just call her May.
May.
But, yeah.
Okay. Mayday.
But her actual name is Mayday. Yep.
Okay. All right. Turf Wars, Section 2. So, gang war erupts and there's tragedy. So, with Fisk and Lee gone, Hammerhead aggressively moves to become the new crime kingpin. So, in Manhattan, you can never have a power vacuum. Somebody will always come in to try to assume it. So, this sparks an all-out Maja gang war shortly after Felicia's disappearance. Spider-Man joins Captain Yuri Watanabe and her police task force in a raid on Hammerhead, but it's a trap. It's a trap. Hammerhead's good.
You did it. You made a Star Wars joke, Shan.
I'm doing it, you guys. The one time I've seen
you
each
pop
of the
cultured.
movies.
Yes.
You know, I pop culture very hard, but Star Wars, I acknowledge all of its fantastic accomplishments, but it is not my franchise. I'll leave it at that.
That's fair. As a diehard
so,
Star Wars fan, that's fair.
Listen, it's
Yes.
how we feel about Lundy towards The Office. It's like Lundy recognizes that it's great, not his thing. Shan recognizes Star Wars is great, but it's not his thing. We've all got something like that.
It has some of the most accomplished
I like all
cultural. It has some of the most important cultural accomplishments in history. I understand this. I did not watch it as a kid, so I don't have the nostalgia to wash over the bad acting, the bad
It's very campy.
dialogue.
Yeah.
It's very campy.
It's campy in a fun way, though.
But it has fantastic story writing, and I know that, and some of the most imaginative world building ever on screen. So like the accomplishments are there; they're significant. It's just really hard to watch. What's his name? Luke Skywalker.
Mark Hamill.
Mark Hamill. It's
Which
really
is
hard to watch
weird.
him before he could act.
Well, which is weird because Mark Hamill is spectacular. He's a fantastic actor that kind of like staggered his way through Star Wars. It's not his best work.
Well, some of it, George Lucas doesn't always evoke the best acting out of.
He's a bad dialogue writer and not a great director.
Especially romance.
Yeah,
he cannot write romance.
The best Star Wars was when George Lucas is coming up with the ideas and somebody else is executing them, like Empire Strikes Back. But to Mark Hamill's credit, and in his defense a little bit, he knew that if the first Star Wars was successful, that they'd be making a trilogy. And he knew kind of the overarching, like he didn't know a lot of, because they hadn't figured it out, but he's said multiple times that that first movie, because he wanted Luke Skywalker to grow and become, this more... He was like, I need to give him somewhere to go. And so he was over the top, like, whiny and immature in that initial Star Wars. So that, he goes from, but I was going to go into Tashi Station to pick up some power converters, to Return of the Jedi when he says, I am a Jedi like my father before me.
Yeah, which is a great... And not to agree...
He does mature fantastic.
I was going to say, to Lundy's point, Mark Hamill is not bad, and he does a lot of good things with those, but it's a mixed bag with Mark Hamill in the Star Wars movies, and I feel like there's only so much you can do with bad dialogue.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of that from his performance, where it's just kind of like, he's like, I don't know what to do with this, so I'm just going to say it. But he has some moments of real greatness as well. I think the moment where he finds out who Darth Vader is really great. Mm-hmm. The I am a Jedi like my father before me is a really well delivered line. So I love you, Mark Hamill. I don't mean to crap on your performance. There's some really good stuff in there too.
Well, it's hard to have a protagonist lead a trilogy and have them be kind of whiny and mediocre at acting. It's a little rough, and you have to be very forgiving.
It is kind of a staple of Star Wars to do that, though. Is it really Star Wars if you don't have like a somewhat grating protagonist, like where you're just like, I like this guy, but it's really hard.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, let's try to get back to this. I don't remember.
No, I think we should talk about Star Wars
it's a trap.
for the rest of
It's
the
a
time.
trap.
Yeah.
That's it.
Shane says it's a trap one time. We get derailed for 10 minutes.
I make one Star Wars reference. It's the last time I'll do that. All right. Hammerhead's goons ambush them with stolen Sable weapons, and they slaughter Yuri's entire team before her eyes. Spider-Man and Yuri barely survive. This devastating loss pushes Yuri to her breaking point emotionally. I love that this, like, it gets really dark. It goes almost like True Detective, noir
It's got
dark.
like some noirish kind of vibes. Yeah.
And like the directing gets very personal. Like they do a lot of close-ups in this section of her, so you get a fantastic mocap of Yuri and the emotional toll it's taking on her, and it humanizes and grounds her quickly, because in the main campaign we just get a lot of her voiceovers. We don't really get to know her. In this moment, when we're seeing her react to her team be devastated and wiped out, and the toll it takes on her, it's like, oh, okay, she is a serious actress, and this is, and I'm invested in her journey now.
Yeah, this scene is a really, I think it's a good starting point for Yuri's kind of disenfranchisement with law enforcement and her kind of journey into darkness a little bit. Because it's so heartbreaking to watch, like, you know, before you're getting ready to go on the raid, there's the police officer who's like, hey, Spider-Man, he's got a Spider-Man watch, and he's like, yeah, my kid gave it to me for my birthday. And so already you get to know that, like, oh, this guy, he's a fan of Spider-Man, and without realizing it, you immediately like, yeah, I love this guy, this police officer, he's amazing. All right. And then when, you know, after this crazy sequence where, you know, Hammerhead's talking about putting the fear back into the NYPD, it's like, you know, in the good old days, they used to fear the Maja. They used to, you know, fear the mob. And he's like, I got to put a little bit of that fear back in. And then, you know, the lights get shot out. There's some gun flashes. You see Spider-Man jumping around. And then when Yuri pulls out her lighter, she turns the lighter back on. And then you see her, you know, Spider-Man's kind of standing huddled over the body of this guy, this police officer. And you're like, oh, he got some of the police officers. And then it pans down and you see the Spider-Man watch on his wrist is broken. And all I could think of in that moment is like, that's someone's father. That kid's dad is never coming home because of what happened here today. And it's just like Insomniac storytelling to get you to like see a character, immediately like them, and then be absolutely devastated when this character who's had like who you've known for like 5 minutes dies, and to just be gutted when that is just like, I don't know how they do it, but it's incredible storytelling, and that scene never gets easier to watch. It's heart-wrenching every time.
Yeah, I think it's just like it worked for this character because like he was jovial and lighthearted, and just like immediately likable because of that, and so to see tragedy hit somebody who had like this childlike fascination with Spider-Man and want to be buddy with him, and then to see the contrasting nature of that. But like you couple that with like, and he talks about his kid, and you're like, yeah, it's the contrasting nature of like something so dark and sinister with talking about the innocence of his family and his kid. And it takes very little, but it's like, this person doesn't deserve this. And yet we just saw an entire squad get wiped out, just like him.
Yeah. And I think it's an effective catalyst that kind of springboards Yuri being like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, kind of a thing. So, and I really like Yuri's character journey over these next couple chapters. I think she's got some interesting stuff going on.
Yeah. As Hammerhead continues terrorizing the city, kidnapping mob bosses and attacking police convoys, Yuri becomes frustrated with the lack of progress. Ignoring Spider-Man's pleas to step back, she goes rogue, executing Hammerhead's men at the bar with no name in cold blood. In the climactic confrontation, Spider-Man confronts Hammerhead, who unveils an experimental Project Olympus exosuit, turning himself into a near cyborg. Cyborg.
Not an all cyborg, just a near. He didn't go full cyborg. He's just mostly cyborg.
You know what? Wouldn't it be? I had ChatGPT draft a lot of this up. Wouldn't he just be a cyborg, because cyborg is already just like a combination of human and robot?
Semantics.
No, I implicitly agree with everything ChatGPT.
Oh no, he
says,
becomes a full
in case they're
cyborg by
watching.
the end.
Yeah.
But in this chapter, he's near. Okay, I get.
He's a medium cyborg.
Yeah.
He's just. Yeah.
I think it's because
nearly cyborg. How could it be nearly
How
cyborg?
can he be nearly cyborg?
Yeah. All right. So
You took a drink at the wrong time, Shan.
I thought that
Shan
I thought
thought
that
we were
Lundy
gonna
was going to
riff
say
for a
something.
I was
we were
going
gonna
to, and then
riff
it was
and
like,
then-
it's not worth it.
Lundy left me out to hang here. All right.
My bad.
I was
My bad.
thirsty. All right. Yuri intervenes, attempting to murder a downed Hammerhead. She only fails because Spider-Man stops her shot at the last second. I love this scene, by the way. The bullet ricochets off Hammerhead's steel skull plate. Hammerhead survives. His henchmen revive him later, but Yuri is suspended from the Force for her action, setting up her vigilante path. So, just how this final climactic scene is directed, how she comes up, guns a-blazing, goes to put the gun to his head, and she's like, "This is it," and you're like, "No, she's not stopping." There's no remorse or there's nothing in her body language that says I am hesitant about this, and you see that there's going to be a absolute follow through, and there's not going to be like a monologue.
The decision's been made. All that's left is to pull the trigger. She's ready to go. Yeah.
And you can only stop it with the alacrity of a Spider-Man whip to jerk, her slightly to the side, and that causes the bullet to ricochet off his face, and it just like pulls off the skin of Hammerhead's face, and it's just like beautiful visuals that you only get from a comic book, and I love that.
Do you want to know my favorite thing about my favorite thing about a Spider-Man thwip is? It's probably the alacrity. I'm always like, yeah, alacrity is a good.
We all learned something today. It's the word alacrity.
Even from context, I'm like, I have no idea what the hell this guy's saying. What does alacrity? Enlighten us, Shan. What does alacrity mean?
It means extreme speed and efficiency.
Gotcha. Okay. It's always good to learn new words. I feel like every time I hang out with Shan, it's like it's hanging out with a word of the day calendar. I always learn something new.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time in my life I've ever heard like what it he's said it a couple times already now. The Deuteronomist or what?
Deuterogamist.
Deuterogamist. That's
It's like a secondary protagonist.
Yeah, I was able to pick that out.
That's one you can get from context. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was like, oh, like I understand the roots here, then like the suffix. It's like I just had never heard that word before, and it's like, okay, I know what that means, but I just didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, secondary character.
I've always just said secondary character or supporting character.
No, you don't have to. No, you don't.
Well, at the Oscars, they've got the lead, best lead actor, and then for the other one, it's best deuterogamist. Yeah. And they give those awards out with alacrity.
You have female deuterogonist and male deuterogonist.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
sorry, I feel like I kind of stepped on Shan's moment. He wanted to talk about how cool that scene was, and I just couldn't get past alacrity.
It's an incredible word. Maybe it's a pretty common word. Maybe you should log it away for future use.
Well, I agree, though. I do really like this scene. I think that watching Yuri just kind of have this, like, this determination and hate in her eyes, and even, like, her gait, how she's walking, it's just like she's here to kill Hammerhead, and nothing's going to stop her because, in her mind, he's crossed a line. And so the only way to get back is for her to cross a line, too. And so I like Yuri's body language here and just this scene and how it plays out. It's very effective.
Yeah, I think it carries a lot of emotional weight too, because you're only playing this if you've played the main campaign, and to see the way that their relationship has grown, like one of my favorite things throughout the main game is kind of the banter between them, especially with the Spider Cop dialogue and everything, and Yuri hating it, and eventually like
Spider Cop. How have we never talked about Spider Cop? He's my it's favorite joke.
It's like one of the greatest running gags throughout the entire game, and and like it's such a victorious moment. Like at least for me, it's like yes, every time that Yuri finally does the Spider Cop voice, and like Peter's like you said it, you did the voice, and
she finally relents.
Yeah, and so like to go from that emotional high to now seeing that trust completely fractured, where it's like Yuri has crossed a line. She didn't kill Hammerhead, but the intent was there. And for Spider-Man, like that is a big, big deal. And you can just kind of see, like when they look at each other at the end, it's like that trust is broken.
Yeah. The only reason she wasn't able to kill Hammerhead is because of Spider-Man's incredible alacrity.
Yeah.
Did I use the word right? Did I do it? The alacritaridousness of him.
Now you sound like a dumbass again.
This is going to be my Aquaria moment. I'm going to get you back.
Surrounded by mediocrity. All right. So,
I'll wear that like a badge of honor. Mediocrity, just right there.
there you go. All right. Okay. So Yuri Watanabe as a foil to Spider-Man. How is she different from a Felicia? What does she get to exemplify in contrast with Spider-Man? Because so she shows that she's willing to cross that moral line, the ethical line of taking life, because she believes in justice at all costs.
I think it's interesting, like, Spider-Man is well established as a vigilante, and Yuri is a cop who she is within the bounds of the law, like whenever you're playing any of like the Fisk-based missions or anything like that, she's constantly like, well, I can't send police over based on a hunch. Like, you have to give me something. You have to give me a reason to enforce the law. Like, we can't, there are laws in place that prevent us. We can't just go outside of that. And so, they kind of work well because they're both on each side of the law, where she follows it by the book, and Spider-Man, he works outside the law to bring justice. And so, like, they play off each other, I think, really well because they're on each side of that line. And that's why I think it's a little bit jarring when Yuri decides, like, okay, I'm also taking the vigilante route, where Spider-Man, we've talked in previous episodes about how Peter Parker doesn't want to be Spider-Man. And, he feels that burden, and he carries that, and he does what he does because he feels like he has to. And so
he knows that because he has the power to help people, he has to do it.
Yeah. And so for him to see somebody where it's like they don't have to go outside like this, and they are actively choosing to live this life that I don't want, it is heartbreaking for him to see Yuri become something that she's not.
Yeah, but to kind of counter argument that a little bit is I think that, Peter feels a responsibility. And I think because of what Yuri has seen happen, that she feels a similar responsibility, and she's just willing to kind of go outside, a little more outside the confines of the law than Peter is, with regards to taking life. But it's like, I feel like to a lesser degree, Yuri sees the pain and suffering caused particularly by organized crime and feels a responsibility to do something about that. So yeah. I think that they've got kind of their similar desires with different methods.
They both technically operate outside of the law. The only real difference is that she's willing to kill people in her pursuit of her version of justice. And it's not even just like, you killed somebody so you deserve death. She seems to just think death is, criminals deserve death. She's just willing to, if the justice system hasn't dealt with a criminal, she is allowed to execute the punishment of death to stop crime.
It's to stop them from doing it again. A criminal can't keep hurting people if they're dead,
Yeah. That's a line that even, we don't see in most vigilante anti-heroes. Even the does the Punisher kill somebody who hasn't killed? He probably does.
Yeah, Punisher is very murdery. He'll kill people. It's like his bar for like doing bad things to deserve to be killed is pretty low. He's like,
I mean, one of my favorite scenes of him in Daredevil season 2 is, he goes to a pawn shop to get some supplies, guns and ammo and things like that, and the guy keeps trying to sell him stuff, tries to sell him some, like, pornography, and Punisher's not interested, and he starts leaving, and the guy's like, oh, maybe you're into this type of stuff, and he says something like, they're underage, or like, they're really young, and Punisher stops and kind of is like, should have stopped talking when you were ahead, and grabs like a bat and locks the door, uses it to block it so that nothing, and it's very much implied that he kills the guy because he is in possession of child pornography. So you don't.
I'm kind of fine with that.
Oh yeah. Like they do that.
That one crosses enough lines.
Yeah, but it's not murder. Like, he doesn't murder people. It's not like he's only killing killers. He's not Dexter. He's like, well, you did a serious illegal thing, and it's better for you to die than to stay on the streets. So for him, it's like, you know, it's not quite Rorschach in Rorschach.
Rorschach.
Yeah, in
I think it's Rorschach. Yeah.
Anyway, like it's not quite Rorschach in Watchmen, but it's close. It's, you know, it's
he is quite murdery.
Yeah.
All right, so I wanted to kind of pose this like little high-minded conversation of justice versus vengeance. We kind of got into this with The Last of Us Part 2. But like, what kind of delineates the two, justice versus vengeance? And I thought, well, justice is arbitrated, it restores balance, and it's within legal confines. And vengeance is almost by definition personal, and it doesn't have to necessarily be balanced. It can be proportional, it can be outsized. And so that's that's a couple ways that they are delineated. But if the justice system fails, are the victims still owed restitution? Is the problem just that you cannot declare yourself an arbiter of fairness? And we give deference to superheroes who execute vigilantism. Do we give deference to superheroes who execute vigilantism because they have immutable morality? So let me try to... that was kind of eclectic thoughts and not strung together well. But I think that superheroes are kind of like ideological proxies that try to persuade us of which philosophical approach to morality we want to adhere to as a society. So arguably the most important superheroes that we elevate as a society can reveal the demographic breakdown of the ideological underpinnings of society. For example, Spider-Man is incredibly popular, one of the most important and popular superheroes in the country, and so is Captain America. And they, they're generally the same. Captain America is more pure and absolute, and Spider-Man bends the rules a little bit more. But then you get the contrasting side of the Punisher, and there is a huge thirst for Punisher in our country, and we're seeing that portrayed pretty accurately in Daredevil Born Again right now. But like, there's a zeitgeist for wanting that version of vigilante justice, where we want somebody to operate all the way outside of the law and just go out and kill people who you think deserve it because you don't think the system will ever work. And so I think that if you kind of took a pie chart of like which superheroes are the most popular, you'd kind of get like a breakdown of demographics in our country of like how we on a spectrum as a country would like justice to be dealt out to people that have crossed the law. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, and I think that, in the United States of America, we have like an extra affinity for these stories of vigilante justice because that's built into like the mythos of our founding. The founding fathers were vigilantes, right? Like they saw a system that they didn't like and they worked outside of it. Like the Boston Tea Party was an act of vigilantism. And so
the
like
first act of superheroes,
yeah,
the Boston Tea Party.
And so like there's
the original Avengers.
Yeah, like
the original Avengers.
You look at like the tales of American founding, like the way that they're told, not necessarily maybe the way that they actually happened, but there's so much of this vigilante justice that's baked into the way that we perceive ourselves. And so, it allows us to view these superheroes as, these heroes, these icons that we look up to and relate to and things like that because we've been raised in a system that was founded on vigilante justice. And so, like, I think that does kind of inform that zeitgeist a little bit, but I agree with you as well that, like, the different demographics of our country relate to the different morality of different superheroes and, their stance and things like that, which is, I think, one of the big draws why we do, we relate to these and we find such fascination in these stories, not only because it's, like, the system that we've been brought up in, but because it is you know, they have similar codes of ethics, and at times they challenge each other, and it gives us something to think about, to be like, well, okay, that's a perspective that I've never considered before, and it's being really well argued, and it makes you kind of stop and think and adjust, like reflect on your own moral code and how that lines up. But I do think I think you're right with a lot of that.
Yeah, like Captain America, it's like, well, I want somebody with absolute, like, I want the morality of our country, but I want it to operate within the bounds of law. And that is Captain America's ideology generally. Whereas Spider-Man, it's, I'm okay with breaking some laws, but I want it to be bound by morality. And then you get somebody like the Punisher, it's like, the system just doesn't work. I just want it to be fixed. I don't care how. And I just want ruthless punishment, and I don't care about the humanity of people who have broken the law, because by the time that they have broken things that we have agreed to as a social contract that we all need to adhere to, if somebody has broken that, then I no longer care about their humanity, and they just need the harshness of justice to be exacted on them by any means necessary. And that's like a huge swing in the opposite direction from a Captain America. But like, there's a huge thirst for that in our country, as well as the strict morality and code of ethics of a Captain America.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, I could go on this topic all day, so maybe we'll save that for another time, because, but yeah, I think that you've nailed it out of the park.
Tucker's not even here to defend himself.
No, he would have just bandwagoned that one.
It's one of my favorite jokes. Nailed it out of the park. The best jokes, I think, are the ones that are by accident, where you like,
just
you think
inside
you're being
jokes.
serious, and then you're accidentally being wrong, and those are the best.
All right, so now we can get to Silver Lining. So we have a city in chaos and Sable's return. After picking up Yuri's departure, New York is under the thumb of Hammerhead. You can see I don't talk like this. This is all AI.
This is Shan. It's his own personal thoughts. He's not reading off of a list. He's this is just him chatting.
All right. I'll just kind of distill. So Silver Sable, she comes back from what's her place called?
Sokovia.
Sokovia. Sokovia is from the Age of Ultron.
There's a lot of fictional countries in Marvel.
There's just not that many countries in real life. Where would this
so
be
many
on
countries?
The map? All right, so she comes back from her country, and she's angry at Spider-Man because he has allowed her tech to fall into the hands of Hammerhead.
Which is like, and where were you, Sable?
Yeah, and she was in Symkaria trying to protect her people from,
so she has a good reason,
her sovereign country being under siege. And so she's furious with him, and so they are not on the same page anymore, and this will be challenged throughout the DLC. And Hammerhead, he has gone full Project Olympus. He is now not semi-cyborg, he is full cyborg. And it is just pure campy. Now,
it gives me like Saturday morning cartoons, like kind of like G.I. Joe kind of vibes, where it's just like the only thing that's not a robot is his head. It's like a Hammerhead's head on top of just a straight up like action figure robot body, and it's like Saturday morning cartoon elevated to like for grown-ups. It's just Saturday morning cartoon for grown-ups, basically. Very silly, very campy, but a lot of fun.
Robot. It's a black robot. This robot's so black, it's the blackest. I feel like marketing's going to be a nightmare for that one. I'm not good at marketing. I'm an ideas guy.
Robot.
Yeah, all right. So they challenged their relationship throughout this whole thing, and she, I don't know, she's a fantastic character. I really love Silver Sable, and they we'll get into their foils later. So the final showdown, they off of the coast of Manhattan. What's that place? What's that body of water called? I don't know. None of us
I don't know off the top of my head.
Is it like the Hudson?
The Hudson. It's right. It's
Oh,
the
yeah.
Hudson, I believe. That's right.
Hang on,
All right.
cut that. Oh, the Hudson. Yeah, I know that.
Oh, the Hudson. Right.
Yeah, the
We
Hudson.
all,
Is that what
we
you
all
meant to say?
definitely
the Hudson?
knew that.
'Cause that's the thing that I knew, and but before we started talking just now. Yeah.
All right. So they get into a final battle there with Robot.
Robot.
And you have this fantastic team up with Sable, and they have some great set pieces in this DLC, where you're like they have like set pieces with like Simcaria tech, where you're like swinging through the city, or you're partnering up with Silver here on the boat, and I love how elaborate they got with this section to be able to kind of challenge the conventions or the simplicity of the earlier sections, where it was just more like brute force brawls with the Maja crime family.
Yeah, it has kind of a like. There's an air of finality to it. It feels like you're building towards something big. I like all of the moments between Spider-Man and Sable here, where they kind of have to work together. They're reluctant allies, sort of a thing. And Peter's perpetual quest to get a high five from Sable always cracks me up. And then at the end, when he finally he tentatively slowly puts his hand out, like they do something good, he's like, ah, and then she kind of smacks his hand away, and he looks at it like that still counts. Like, I was like, high five, we did it.
No, it was at first she holds out her hand and he puts the thumb drive in it, and he's like, oh, because he's like, oh, okay, this isn't. I think she's going for a down low, and she's just looking for. And he's like, I know what this is. You just want the thumb drive. Later, he holds it up, and you look. It's like she's about to just walk away. She smacks it, and he's like, ow, but all right.
But all right, yeah.
I do love the chemistry that develops between them, like when she's finally leaving, because she has repeatedly said, she's like, no, I don't do the hero thing. Like, she sees herself more in the gray area. And Spider-Man's like, you've got the right motivations. You're basically a hero. And, when she's leaving, she's like, but, you did, I am taking some lessons from you, Spider, like, you did teach me some things. And he's like, oh, yeah, like what? And she's like how to disarm my, alacrity.
The alacrity of his humor.
But, yeah, she says, how to disarm my enemies using bad jokes. And Spider-Man's like, actually, they're good jokes, but I understand that humor is subjective.
Oh, I also love. I don't remember the exact line, but there was early
good jokes.
There's a line earlier in the DLC where he says something, and she's like, "I'm not a man," and he's like, "Well, maybe that was lost in translation." I don't. Oh, man.
I think he says, you're a good guy or something. She's like, I'm not.
You're a good guy.
Or, yeah.
I'm not good, and I'm not a guy.
Yeah.
That's right. Thank you for helping me with that. All right, so as far as how Silver foils Spider-Man, now they both have a strict code of honor and responsibility, and but there's a scale to the two of them, whereas Spider-Man is focused on ground level and Manhattan and primarily Queens. She has the power and ability to care for a nation, and so that is how she thinks, is on the scale of Simcaria. She has to take care of everyone, and that has forced her to be a lot more ruthless as a character and brutal, and so she's willing to cross lines that Spider-Man doesn't. So in that way, she's like, well, if you need to care for a nation, wouldn't you need to challenge your moral code to be more ruthless? And so they're just constantly challenging each other in that way. And but otherwise, they're pretty similar, just more extreme in different ways.
He's a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and she's a stoic national Sable. That was a really good joke. You're welcome. I'm very proud of myself for that. Don't cut it. It's good. I liked it.
Wasn't going to.
I think that one of the other ways, because they do have a lot of similarities in, how some of their motivations and things, and so I like that, since they don't have, I guess their motivations are so similar that in order to kind of create that foil, while Spider-Man is very jokey and very quippy and, very lighthearted, they do give her that very serious edge, where, it's like, to her, like, a high five is just way too, lighthearted. It's like, hey, this is serious. Like, let's, we don't have time for silly gestures like high fives, where she's just unwilling to do it. And you do see her start to, kind of loosen up, and, that hardness starts to soften. But I think that's one of the ways that they do create that foil, is like they are so different in just their mood and their temperament.
And it does pose like an interesting question to Spider-Man of, if you truly have this power and the responsibility that comes with this power, then how are you not thinking on the scale of protecting more people like she is? And he's never broken ground level crime fighting, and it's not going to change him, but it does challenge it at least. Yeah. And also throughout this DLC, we see him interacting with Miles, and Miles just keeps wanting to push the boundaries on their relationship so that he can become a Spider-Man. And so I feel like his relationship that he's challenging with Silver is also pushing him with Miles, and he is growing into this mentorship, leadership role and his path of maturity. And so that is a mantle he ends up adopting by the end, and it is rewarded as we get to the Miles Morales, game that comes after this.
Yeah, the little conversations with Miles are some of the highlights for me in these 3 DLC chapters. Kind of as you're swinging around, sometimes Miles will call and they have a little conversation, and Miles will be like, "Oh, when can we start spider training?" Or like, "Oh, I tried a thing and I broke my toe and I had to go to the hospital. Did you know there's nothing they can do for that? They just send you on your way." And it's just showing Miles being really eager to start his spider training, and he wants to be Spider-Man. But Peter, being wise and having gone down that route before, is like, let me help you kind of direct this, this desire to be Spider-Man, and I'm hopefully to help you get off on a better foot than I did when I first started doing this. And I mean, he doesn't really say that, but you can kind of see that Peter's desire to help Miles be better than him is really evident in the conversations that they have, where Peter's like, "Well, let's train and wait for me before you do this, and like, I promise we'll train soon." He's like, you can do this with me because you've got power, so you have responsibility too, but let me help you to train and do it right,
Yeah. Black Cat has come back as an ex machina, a Deus Ex Machina in this section. It's pretty badass, so I'll allow it, similar to how we allow it in the Lord of the Rings when the undead arrive and kill everyone. We allow it because it's badass, right? Yeah. That's the qualifications for a Deus Ex Machina. And so she has been inspired by Spider-Man and his consistency and his morality, his moral compass that is unwavering. And he has inspired Silver Sable to refine her moral code, although we don't see if that pays off. It's just something that she alludes to being interested in and inspired by. And he is inspiring Miles Morales. So even though we don't necessarily see a whole lot of growth in Peter Parker and Spider-Man's character, we get to see what the immutability of his character accomplishes. And I think that's fascinating and a great accomplishment of this DLC.
Yeah. I agree. I don't have anything to add to that. I think that, yes, you are correct. It's a terrible segue. Sometimes when someone finishes a thought and then there's just like this dead air for a second, I'm like, I agree with that. I don't have anything to add. You did
Well,
it.
you should just then at that point refer to It's Always Sunny and just say, dead air. Or I could say that. I don't know. There you go. And I'll be crunching on some chips or whatever. All right, so DLC in retrospect. Now that we've discussed all 3, which episode was your favorite, or your favorite part of the 3?
I think that my favorite episode might be the first one. Like I said, I didn't play it. The last time I played it was probably about a year ago. But I like the first one just because I like the dynamic between Peter and Felicia a lot, between Spider-Man and Black Cat. And, as a big Spider-Man fan all my life, it's always fun to see a fan favorite character like Black Cat make an appearance. And so I think that they're back and forth and her kind of trying to manipulate him a little bit. And also I think there's, in that chapter, there's a side mission where you can go around and find paintings and stuff that were hidden by the original Black Cat. And you're given them those missions by over radio by a police officer that you realize is actually Felicia's dad. And so there's some fun story moments and stuff in there. So probably the first chapter is the one I like the best, but I think they're all really, really solid.
I would agree with that. I think that the first one is the one where I have the most fun. I really like all of the others, for the things that they do story-wise. I feel like from a gameplay perspective, I start to burn out a little bit more just because, you're overburdened by these screwball challenges that just really are so taxing. And I really, I love so much about what Insomniac did with these games. So it's it almost feels like borderline blasphemous to criticize things that they did in this, but I really, really, really hate the screwball challenges a lot. And so that, I start to burn out a little bit. And it's because I'm a completionist with the Spider-Man games. Most games not that way, but I love this one so much that it's I have to complete everything every playthrough. And so the screwball challenges come up and I'm like, ugh, I have to do this again. I hate them so much.
I don't like this. I agree. The screwball challenges are super annoying, and it's because
they can go to hell.
For a couple reasons. It's because they're side missions that I don't always really enjoy when I'm being graded on something. It's do this side mission, and you just do the side mission. It's great. And it's do the side mission, and there's a gold, silver, and bronze medal. And I'm no, I'm not a fan of that. I want to just do it if I want to do it. And that's that's an Eric thing. Some people love to be scored and graded on their things, but it's I hate when the best bit of content is locked behind you have to get gold medal for blah blah blah, and it's I just want to play it. I don't want to play it perfectly. If I mess up, I don't want to feel ugh, I have to start over. I want to just be whoops, I messed up, and I'll think on my toes and figure it out. And so that's a frustrating thing, but then it's also wrapped up in the most annoying character in this game, where she has a grating personality, is annoying to deal with. And so the challenges aren't terrible, but they're not really my cup of tea, and they're framed with the most annoying character in any of these Insomniac games. And so I just hard pass. I think they make you do one each chapter to reintroduce the screwball character, and those are the only ones I ever do. Except for the first time I played the DLC, I 100% it like Lundy, but every time since I've been nope, forget screwball, not a fan. See you later.
I'll still say this game is a 10, and the screwball challenges can go to hell.
It's just a dingleberry hanging off the side. It's completely tertiary content. You don't have to engage with it at all if you don't want to. So,
however,
whatever.
I do think they nailed it out of the park as far as making an influencer unbearable and thirsty enough for attention
you don't have to try
commit
hard.
crime.
Yeah.
Because we are living that right now, where it's some of the worst personalities in our culture right now are ones that basically push the boundaries on committing crime for attention and try to kill themselves for attention.
Yep. Screwball just took it to 11.
Remember swallowing Tide Pods? That's how dumb people are for attention.
Yeah, it's
so she's just an amalgamation of everything I hate about an influencer.
Yeah, no, I mean there's a new documentary coming out for some influencers, that are siblings, and I'm not going to give them the decency of saying their names.
I wonder who you're talking about.
I'm not going to say their names
the
on
people
here.
I was thinking about while I was saying it.
Yeah, and part of the reason why I won't say their names is because in the trailer for this new documentary, they talk about how, modern day currency is attention, right? And that's what they're after. They're we don't need this, that, or the other. It's attention, and the more you can hold people's attention, that is today's currency. And it's I'm giving them attention by alluding to them. I understand, but it's they are screwball, And Screwball, I think, does a good job. Like, I actually do think that this is a good interpretation. You know, like, adding that character. It's just like, I appreciate what they did. I just hate playing it. But, yeah, I think that it is a great take on, you know, influencer culture and how terrible it is. And so I think
it's very effective. Yeah, because it annoys the hell out of me.
Yeah.
It's exactly what they were going for, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish we had, like... I love, like, the laws that we have in our country, and, like, I would want to live in them. I don't want to throw them out, you know, necessarily. However, I would throw them out for influencers, and I would just have a completely different set of laws for them. And I would go full Venezuela.
Once you get to a certain count of followers, you just get a different set of laws. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, believe it or not, straight to jail. You just like on Parks and Rec.
Charge too much for sweaters, straight to jail. Yeah.
You undercook fish, you overcook fish. Believe it or not, straight to jail. Like, I would do that for influencers. Like, they literally do anything that I think annoys another human being. I would send them straight to jail. That would put the kibosh on that whole culture. Or at least demonetize them and, like, kill their channels. That would also work.
Yeah, and then jail.
And then straight to jail.
And then straight to jail.
All right. Was dead air. See, there it is. I did it on myself.
Yeah.
Right. So I wanted to get into strong female leads because that is clearly something they focused on in the DLC. We had Felicia Harding. Is that what it was?
Were they leads or were they deuterogonists?
They were deuterogonists.
Deuterogonists.
But they were supporting leads. So it's still leads, but supporting. That being said, Insomniac is fantastic at writing female characters because we had Felicia Harding, we had Yuri Watanabe, and we had Silver Sable, but we've also had MJ and Aunt May. Yeah. And I have loved all 5 of these characters. They are... they all have their own motivations. They're all very interesting, complex characters, or at least, I wouldn't say Aunt May is necessarily a complicated character. She's just,
but she's portrayed well, and she's interesting, perfect, right?
And she's well acted and has fantastic dialogue. Like, they give just as much care to these female characters as they do to male, and I'm as compelled or more compelled by them than any male on screen, and they complement Spider-Man's character every time they're on screen. They're fascinating. So I wanted to kind of have like bonus segment here at the end to kind of dig into like, how do they do it, right? How do we get strong female characters, and how is it different from writing a strong male character? Because it is different from just saying, let's put a female in a male's body and voila, we have a strong female character. And I'm interested in what the differences are. So go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say, well, I guess to Shan's point, when he reached out to us a few hours ago and was to let us know that we were going to be talking about this. He's like, so think of some of your favorite like female characters in fiction, and I made myself a little list because I was trying to think of the ones that were my favorite, and so I've got a good little list of some female characters here that in like TV shows and in well I'll let you keep going and I'll let you get to that then. You do your thing, and
I'll just kind of break down like my top level thoughts. So female characters, they kind of have to break conventions differently from men, so they have their own culture and narrative context that they have, those conventions that they have to break. They have historical stereotypes, and they have to have agency. So a lot of times in a poorly written female character is one that is basically purely reactionary to a male character, and she lacks agency and internal motivation, and she just is there to act as a supporting supplementary character to the man's agency, and that makes them flat, two-dimensional, and boring. And it's not necessarily that you can't write a character like that. Like, we need two-dimensional male and female characters in every story, because two-dimensional characters can act as an anchor to the protagonist. So it's not something you can't do, and it needs to be, you need to pick and choose. I'm saying if you're going to write a compelling protagonist, deuteragonist, whatever, I'm just saying if you want something to be compelling, you have to be very aware that you are writing them with their own motivations, and they are not simply reacting to somebody else's agency. And they need to be, as I was saying earlier, they need to, women have a different culture and history and tropes that they have to break than men do. They have different expectations and burdens from historical context. So they have like damsel in distress tropes, whereas men don't have that. And they're typically more passive characters. And so how do you break that convention? So that's another thing to be aware of. So I wanted to get into, first I have to call out the most important, arguably in my opinion, female protagonist in movie history would have to be Ripley from Alien, because she is the first seminal female protagonist or action protagonist.
I had her on my list. Yeah, she's a good one.
Yeah. I believe there were, some smaller female action heroes before this, but like nothing that hit the highs of a Ripley in Alien. And she wasn't just a female version of a typical male hero. She was resourceful, determined, and deeply human. Whereas like you get 80s action heroes of the time, a Schwarzenegger or who was the other 80s action hero that I'm thinking? Stallone. Yep. You get those, and they just check the boxes of like brawny, a male,
glistening muscles,
goes on with guns akimbo. Yeah. Whereas like women have to be some version of what a female is, but they also have to break conventions and find and share archetypes of being a leader as well, which isn't their default role in most movies, because their historical context is being a passive reactionary character. Those qualities challenged the gender norms of sci-fi at the time. Her character wasn't defined by her relationship to the male characters. Instead, she drove the narrative and set the standard for future protagonists. So Ripley, you are a badass, and I love Sigourney Weaver for what she accomplished in Ripley.
It's such an awesome movie and such an awesome protagonist. Really she does a really good job of making you as the viewer feel small and terrified in moments of fear with the alien, but then strong and empowered when she starts to fight back. And so, such a cool movie.
It's like she's taking advantage of being a female in that context.
Yeah, kind of. And so it connects the viewer to those feelings in the movie, which why I think that watching Alien, even though like the aliens are all, or the alien in that movie is kind of like, the practical effects are like a little silly, a little cheesy, but even with
especially
that, especially the first one, but even with that, it still feels like really tense and scary and creepy, because you're kind of seeing this world through her as a character, and she's feeling those things, and those feelings kind of are transferred to you as the viewer. So I like it. She's
also,
a good choice.
Thank you, Ripley, for giving us Samus Aran, because
she's on my list too. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's a 1-to-1 why we got Metroid.
100%. Yeah, the original Metroid was hugely influenced by Alien. Like the creators have said as such many, many times.
Yes.
So.
I also love that. Okay, so Aliens, maybe the best sci-fi movie, in my opinion, that I've ever seen. And I love that, like, the theme of that movie is motherhood, so it's a very female-centric theme. But they use it in like a badass way, right? Like it's not like they use these things that in an action context would typically denote weakness and would put her as the victim, and they actually say, this is the definition of what it takes to be a mother, and how strong you have to be to assume that role, and how you would, there are no lines that you wouldn't cross to protect a child. And what I love is that they take that and they foil it with the queen Xenomorph, because the queen Xenomorph is also a mirror example of a mother protecting her brood. And so those two are challenging each other on who is the strongest to survive in a mother versus mother situation.
My mom could beat up your mom. That's all that movie
exactly
is.
Right.
Yeah.
It is such a fantastic movie. Other fantastic female leads that just nailed it out of the park. We got Sarah Connor from Terminator, badass, and Princess Leia from Star Wars. So, action, sci-fi, I love you.
Yeah, Princess Leia was probably the top of my list because, you know, they set her up to follow so many of the same tropes where it's like, oh no, the princess has been captured, you know, now we need to send in the men to save her. And I love how, like, they show up to save her and it instantly flips it where, you know, Luke goes into the jail cell and she's like, aren't you a little short to be a stormtrooper? Like, she's clearly unimpressed, but when she hears, oh, Obi-Wan, the guy that I asked for is here, she goes with them, but then they're trapped in this hallway and Han and Luke are like, well, we gotta shoot our way out or whatever, you know, they're kind of, and she grabs a gun from one of them and she's like, somebody's got to be the one that saves our skins, and she blows open the trash chute and is like, get in there. And she's the one that's calling the only reason they get off the Death Star is because Leia is resourceful and on top of things. And, you know, so like she ends up kind of leading the rescue effort. And then they get back and it's like she's the one in charge at the rebellion who's like, all right, here's, you know, all of this kind of stuff. She's orchestrated so much of this effort to overthrow the Empire. And so I love how they portray her, where it's like they set up a very stereotypical thing of like, the princess has been captured and here come the knights in shining armor to save her.
Literal princess being captured.
Yeah. And like, you know, they show up in literal shining armor, like they're wearing the white stormtrooper armor, you know, like to save her. And then she's like, wow, you guys are idiots. Like, and she, you know,
bunch of scruffy nerf herders.
Yeah. And so I love that. Another one that's on my list is Agent Scully from X-Files.
Oh,
I
choice.
think she is so well played. Dana Scully. In fact, it's, you know, that's from the early 90s, and there is an actual measurable thing called the Scully effect, where as a result of her character, there has been a dramatic increase of women in STEM fields, because she was a very competent character. You know, she's in the FBI. She's a very capable investigator, but she also has she got 2 degrees. She got an MD, so she's a certified medical doctor. She's incredibly smart, and she's constantly, you know, the main character, you know, Fox Mulder, who's very, like, you know, into paranormal stuff, throughout the entire series, she's constantly challenging him, where, you know, he's kind of doing his own thing, and even when he's right, she's like, well, slow down, like, you know, here are these opposing viewpoints that you need to take into consideration. Like, she's constantly challenging and pushing him to be better when they're working together. And she is just, you know, she's a phenomenal character where, you know, for a long time, like, there are even seasons where, you know, Fox Mulder is out of the picture because, you know, outside of the world, like, negotiations with David Duchovny kind of broke down, so, like, he just wasn't in the show for a while, and Scully carries the show, and you kind of don't even really miss Mulder. You know, like, she's a strong enough character that you can take away, you know, the character that the show is built on, and it continues to go without a hitch. Like, she's just a wonderfully strong written character who, you know, doesn't need to be this action hero. She's just you know, able to look at things analytically and reason them and you know, ask the right questions and drive the plot forward in a meaningful way.
Yeah, she's cold and pragmatic and analytical, and is antithetical to the expectations that we put on typical female protagonists, or the career path that is traditional for females. And yeah, and so as you pointed out, that's what inspired women to go into STEM, if that was a proclivity that they had, or a hidden talent that they didn't know they could explore because it hadn't been challenged in a way that she challenged on screen. And I love that that's what media can do for anybody. It challenges the norms, but it does it for a culture generally, and then we discuss it as in the zeitgeist, and we take parts of it, we leave parts of it, and then we absorb it and we move forward. And Star Trek was very capable of pushing the boundaries on cultural norms, and we as a culture grew a lot because of Star Trek, so we have to give plaudits there. So, and then whereas like Scully was like anathema to the traditional female career and character traits that we'd expect from a female, I love that Princess Leia was, she's smart and sexy and cool in a way that we actually would expect from a traditional female role, but she also uses it in subversive ways and is the most capable and intelligent person in the room, and that is actually what saves them most of the time. So they use that, they actually subvert the scenario with her female traits. And so I'll come back to that when I get to my favorite. Well, I'll just talk about it now. So my favorite female
was
character...
Ripley not your favorite? You already did yours.
Nope. My favorite
Shan
character...
gets 2. Yeah.
No, I was just pointing out the most
I'm just giving you a hard
important
time.
My favorite is Leslie Knope from Parks and Recreation. Yeah. So she has political aspirations, which are no longer atypical for a female. But the fascinating thing about her character is that she has exaggerated feminine traits and challenges them in the political arena. And she ultimately derives all of her leadership and power from her depth of compassion and friendship. And those are anathema to the traditional political acumen. Her character's thesis is that those traits can earn you greater political capital and traction, and she convincingly rises to every challenge and overcomes every obstacle and setback until she shatters the glass ceiling. So, similar to Princess Leia, Leslie Knope actually exaggerates her female traits, and that actually makes her more competent than her male colleagues. And she does get pushed down because of her female traits. The compassion, her lack of sociopathy, essentially, in the political arena actually does come with setback, but because she's so ambitious and driven and compassionate towards her friends, her community keeps pushing her up when she's down, and it makes a compelling argument for how you can rise above your situation with a completely different set of skills that we can find more traditionally in women. And I love that they didn't have to write her as a man. They wrote her as a woman, and she excelled because of that in very compelling and in interesting ways.
Yeah. I have Leslie Knope on my list too, but I hadn't thought that deeply into it. I think that it's a very funny show, and I think that she's a very good character. And so I kind of am surprised that Shan didn't say Alexis Rose from Schitt's Creek. I've heard multiple times how much. I'm sure that was somewhere on your list of consideration because she's such a great character.
I named my daughter after Alexis. That's how important Alexis is to me.
So
Alexis Rose.
Alexis Rose. Yeah.
Sorry, why did I say? I'm gonna cut that.
What? Everybody,
I get
I want
the
you to know
final
that
say
Shan just said. Shan just cut something, and I was going to repeat it
from Schitt's Creek. All right,
from Schitt's Creek. So Alexis Rose from Schitt's Creek is something I thought Shan would pick. So she was on my list. I thought about her. I also was thinking about Commander Shepard. You can choose to be female option, which is a harder one to choose because it's just she has all of her lines are exactly the same. She's just as the male Commander Shepard, and so. But that one can kind of go either way. I also wrote down Eleanor Shellstrop from The Good Place.
I was hoping to get to that. Yeah.
She again wasn't the one that I ended up picking as the top one. But I think that her character growth over the show and her desire to do good and be better is really interesting character growth to watch. But eventually, what I ended up going with was, and this is the ultimate choice for like a parent of two daughters, is Moana. I really like the movie Moana. I unapologetically love that movie. I think it's a fantastic movie with an excellent story, with lots of really good, for me at least, like things that I find spiritually uplifting. I think it's a great movie. And I like Moana as a character because she is determined. She is like strong-willed is the word I'm looking for. She's determined and strong-willed, and she's got a calling that is calling to her that feels greater than herself. And at the beginning of the movie, she feels like that's something that's wrong with her, that this calling, and she's like, "What's wrong with me? I like this." The ocean is calling to her, and she feels like it's something that she needs to suppress or that she can't do because her father is telling her the ocean is unsafe. Don't go out into the ocean. Don't go beyond the reef. Kind of a thing. And she's like, but the ocean is calling to me. There's a line where the sky meets the sea and it calls me. And which is a great song. But I just think it's a really powerful story about finding out who you are, and finding out what matters to you. And I think that Moana exemplifies that really well. In a moment of darkness right before the final confrontation, for like the big bad in the movie, Moana has a moment of doubt where she doubts herself and her journey. She makes an attempt against the giant lava monster. She's trying to bring the heart of Te Fiti back to its rightful island. And there's a lava monster guarding the island. She has a big fight with the lava monster. Maui, who is the demigod who's helping her, he's defeated and he flies off. He's like, I don't want to be a part of this. She's just alone on her boat. And she calls out to the ocean and says, "You chose wrong. I choose someone else. I'm not the right person for this." Throws the heart back into the ocean and it sinks to the bottom. And then in a moment, her darkest moment, she is uplifted by a vision of her grandma who asks her a question, do you know who you are? And then she sings a little song about knowing who she is. And I think that Moana is an excellent example of like knowing who you are and being okay with who you are, and using those, understanding that who you are can lift you up and help you to accomplish what you need to accomplish. And she has this in the song. It's just a great moment where she sings about who she is and she slams her foot down and then calls out into the ocean and says, "I am Moana," and then finishes her quest. And I think it's a wonderful story. And I am just a big fan of that movie. I really, it's unapologetically, no shame. Not even like, I love to watch my kids watch it. I love that movie. I get mad when they watch it without me. I think it's a great movie.
I just haven't seen it all the way through, but
you should. It's fantastic.
I'm not against Disney. It's just one I haven't seen. That's all.
Yeah.
It was outside of the window of when I was watching Disney movies regularly. That's all. And I have a kid now, so it's like it'll come. I just don't want to start now.
It's a good one with great music.
Yeah. To your point, Alexis Rose, I do want to. I hadn't actually thought about it, her name, but yes, Alexis Rose, because she starts as like a traditional type of female character who doesn't need to have a career, and she's and she's aimless because of not having that definition and those guardrails on her life. And
she's just a spoiled, pretty fool. Yeah.
Yeah. And she ends up being pushed here and there because of this situation, and she finally decides to take control of her life and establish her foundation. And once she sees that that foundation is coming to be challenged by a potential future relationship with Ted, she has to make the ultimate decision of relationship or her future with her career. And she chooses her career because she needs to feel personally fulfilled and not fulfilled by proxy or by definition of her relationship to someone else. And that's exactly why I'm in love with La La Land. It's painful. It's really hard to watch, but to understand that these characters couldn't have gotten where they are by the end without each other, and so their stories still matter even though they don't end up together, unlike How I Met Your Mother, where the characters don't matter to each other. They just
I could talk all day about how angry that show makes me.
The mother just dies. She's a meat puppet for babies.
It's exactly what... It's fine. We don't have to talk about it. That's exactly what it is.
She gets fridged.
It is so insulting as a character to just like, and to be crass, it just like, when I watched that for the first time, it felt like Ted was actually in love with Robin the whole time, and he just needed a person that he could hump some babies into so that he could be with the person that he actually loved. And I was like, what a gross way to devalue a character and make her feel unimportant and like a meat bag for babies. It just felt, it made me uncomfortable. I was like, that's gross. I don't like it. It was bad. It was just bad.
Yeah. 9 years of persuading his children to give him the permission structure to hump his best friend.
It's gross and weird and a bad story to tell your children.
Real quick, just one more that like just came to me. Like I hadn't thought of it until like the middle of this discussion. And I won't go too much into this because I don't want to spoil anything for Shan since he's about to watch it. But Invincible's mom in the show Invincible, she
Deborah.
is Deborah. I couldn't remember her name, but yeah, she is a phenomenal character because she's married to a superhero and her son becomes a superhero, and she is not powered, but she is his tether to morality. You know, she's the one that teaches him like his moral code, and like has this great conversation with him very, very early on in the series where she's like, you know, what, you have powers that I don't. Does that make you feel strong that like, you know, like I can't physically force you to do something? Like, does that make you feel like a better person than me? And like she really challenges, you know, and like their relationship is so wonderful, and just seeing how she is as a parent and how she shapes him, you know, like where he gets his powers from his father, but who he is as a person comes from his mother, and like their relationship is just so well defined, and like she's just such a great, expertly written character where, you know, like she does fit a lot of kind of just traditional feminine, you know, qualities, but like she's not being reduced to that. She's instead being elevated, where it's like these are these great qualities about her that she executes to perfection and makes everybody better because of who she is.
Yeah, she's great. Voiced by Sandra Oh, and does an incredible job. But yeah, I didn't think about that one either. I didn't put that on my list, but she's fantastic.
Yeah. I had this insight while I was thinking about this final section to our pod, but male protagonists are often cast in well-established archetypes without needing to challenge them. They are actually vaunted for being formulaic, whereas female protagonists are expected to subvert them because it's not their default role. However, whenever a female character or actress convincingly nails that execution, she is cemented as an indelible figure. And so I kind of alluded to this earlier. In 80s action movies, we get our Stallones and our Schwarzeneggers, and they are just meatheads. They are the prototypical male, and they are the most iconic figures of a generation because they check the boxes of being a male protagonist, whereas the most indelible female protagonists of that exact same generation are the ones that push the boundaries and challenged their gender expectations, because they as gender are historically in film had to be reactionary passive characters, and so to take on a lead role they had to subvert those roles in interesting ways. And so it's interesting that there's that dual, or that what's the word I'm thinking of, dual expectation, double standard between those two.
I wonder if we had Emily or another woman on, if they'd have some different thoughts about women in more like, I don't want to say stereotypical, but like roles that are not really breaking the mold, that could fit this like really iconic, that just aren't occurring to us because none of us are women. So I don't know.
It could be, and I'm just thinking of action movies right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, in action movies, it made that argument makes sense, that to really stand out, they'd have to break the mold. The females might have to break the mold and be a little more surprising, because It's just not as expected. So I don't know. It'd be an interesting thought experiment to different genres of movies and different character types and different genders, and how that affects like how iconic they are down the line. And so that's interesting thought.
But,
yeah, I guess Meryl Streep was iconic in a lot of her stuff. I just don't care about her. And those
Shan loves Meryl
Streep. I do think though that, like, coming back, like Invincible's mom is one that doesn't break the mold. Like she very much fits that. She is the nurturer, and she is what kind of, like, I guess, traditional femininity is, and it showcases where it's like, this is, if somebody, like, if a woman doesn't want to break the mold, here is still, like, that prime example of how they are a great character that still has agency, is very capable, still, like, obviously, like anybody, has to react to certain things happening, but she's not purely a reactionary character. She is very driven and is an integral part of that story, and that just, everything about that. Like, you couldn't have so much of what they do without her.
Right. Well, and I'm mostly getting at, like, you can still have phenomenal characters whether or not they have that, but I'm talking about, like, the most iconic in history. And so, for example, in contrast, we have Ellie and Joel. Ellie is very unconventional, and Joel is exactly what you want in a male character. And Sarah Connor and the Terminator, stark contrast in our expectations of those two. And then we have Princess Leia and Han Solo.
Interesting.
Whereas,
the data does seem to kind of infer, like I said, there's got to be other examples of iconic characters that just aren't occurring to us, but that does seem to be a little bit of a pattern. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
I was I was thinking of other 80s movies, and it's like, you know what? Men can be iconic for doing either, because you get Indiana Jones, one of the best written characters in history, and he is just as soft and charismatic and personable and convivial as any female type character, but he is also a badass, and so he gets to live both roles.
It's contractually obligated. If he's in a movie, it's like they can't. That's part of his contract. It's just like, well, is the character a badass? Yeah, then I'll do the film. Like, sure.
He was Jason
It's one of his
Statham
most
before Jason
complex
Statham.
characters.
Yeah, he's the proto Jason Statham. Now that makes it sound like Jason Statham is better. So I rescind. He's Jason Statham before Jason Statham.
Anyway, thought experiment. I'm sure that, like, as soon as we get off this,
let us know
I
in
can
the
think
comments
of a bunch of female characters that are just as iconic. That
if you've got examples of how we're wrong, drop them in the comments, and we'll agree with every single thing that you say.
Because we want to be liked. We need to be liked.
It's not like my need to be praised. Yeah.
There you go.
It's another Office quote. Sorry, Lundy.
Yeah, we kind of butchered it in delivery, but we knew what it was.
No, it was really good. It was perfect.
I don't need to be liked. I want to be liked. It's not like my compulsive. Yeah, anyway, who cares? All right, well, thank you for joining us for the DLC of Marvel's Spider-Man, and that wraps up this game. And thank you, Lundy, for joining us for this. It was a fantastic addition.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I always enjoy replaying this game, and it was about time that I did so anyway. So thank you for, the invite to play through and talk about it.
Yeah, we will definitely have you back for, the other Spider-Man games whenever we can get to that, whenever they're relevant again, because apparently this game didn't do very well when we released it.
Yeah, watch it more. If you want to hear us talk about Spider-Man stuff, watch it more.
Yeah, idiots. No, we. I don't think you're allowed to insult your audience, or you immediately get canceled. But also, I was thinking you should definitely come back for. Is it called Marvel 1943 this year?
Yeah, I think
that's not going to be this year.
That one will probably get
like it'll probably get pushed.
Delayed.
But
I'll eat my hat if it's this year. Whenever they announce a game and they give a deadline, if that deadline is a year or more away from when they announce it, it's actually going to be 2 years. If we get that game in 2025, I don't know. I'll do something crazy. It's not going to happen. It'll be sometime next year. I bet it's fall of 2026 is when it actually happens.
I'm very excited for that game because we're getting Amy Hennig back, and we haven't had her since the original Uncharted games, or at least nothing important since the Uncharted games. And she was in the first. She did a lot of the primary writing and directing for the first 3 Uncharted games until it was given up for what's his face, for
the
guy Neil Druckmann.
Yeah.
And so she's taking on this directorial and writing role, and it's going to be more story driven than your conventional
thank heavens
superhero
get rid of
games.
This online multiplayer nonsense.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, like Guardians of the Galaxy, fantastic fun game.
I actually didn't play that one.
Surprising. It's very surprisingly fun.
I've heard that a lot, and I know that it just didn't get played a ton because it was the same company that made Avengers, and a lot of people, including myself and Eric, were very, very disappointed with how that Avengers game turned out.
It was like, fool me once.
So, like, it's got a pretty repetitive gameplay loop, but the gameplay loop is very fun, despite being kind of simplistic. But what the most surprising thing is, well, the visuals are fantastic, but the most surprising thing is that the story is actually really good. And so it's really poignant, and it's just as heart-wrenching as the films. And so it's just as, and like they find interesting ways to explore the exact same characters that you already know from the film, so it feels fresh.
Put it on my backlog. Check it out.
Yeah, there's plenty on there.
Yeah, I don't have enough on my backlog. Yeah. Always could use more.
And then there's also the other one I was thinking of. Insomniac is doing it, right? The
Wolverine game.
Yeah, Wolverine.
That's
game.
another one that they haven't ever given a date or really even a proper trailer. They gave a teaser trailer like 2 years ago now. It's been forever, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Please like, comment, subscribe, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and
Instagram.
Listen to Eric's Indie Corners on Thursdays also.
Also Instagram.
Bye, everyone.
Follow us on Instagram. And tune in next time. We have a fun, I think we're doing I don't want to spoil it, we're doing retro thing, right? The one that we have lined up.
Eric, you keep not wanting to spoil, but I don't think people are going to tune in unless we tease it.
Okay, well, fine. So Majora's Mask is next time, right? That's what we're doing next time?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, yay. So come back for Majora's Mask. It's a good one. You'll have a great time, and so will we. It's Lundy's favorite game.
It is not.
All right, so I guess we won't be.
Lundy's not invited.
Subscribe for the next 3 or 4 months.
He's not invited to the Majora's
Mask
episode.
and maybe Resident Evil and maybe Death Stranding. That's probably the sequence, but we'll see.
Wow, you just really, really laying it out. Our plans for the next couple months.
We are not bound by it. That is just the soft plan.
No, we have to now. You said it.
I've said very many things that we have not done in this podcast.
Really, it's a wild card. We say Majora's Mask, and the next episode is going to be, you don't even know. We're going to play BioShock. Who knows?
We're going to skip straight to Infinite.
Yep. All right, bye.
Outro. Bleepity-doof, bleepity, bloopity, blow.